All right, thanks. All right, Travis, let's get us going.
Hello and welcome to Center City Residents Association's third Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Sense in the City discussion. I'm Travis Oliver, Managing Director of CCRA, and I'm standing in for Maggie Munn, who is our JEDI Chair, who cannot join us today. Now, before we get started, I would like to let you know that this presentation is being recorded, and I would ask that everyone remain muted during this presentation. Our presenter is Hugh Taft-Morales, who serves as leader of the Philadelphia Ethical Society. Today's discussion is homelessness and humanity. Hugh will walk us through dealing with personal reactions from compassion and concern to fear and frustration and how we can humanize this issue. So if you missed any other discussions, you can find them on our YouTube page, Center City Residents Association. So thanks for being here, and a special thanks to all who volunteered to facilitate in the breakout rooms. And without ado, here's Hugh. Take it away.
Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it. So today's topic is homelessness and humanity, and it's about how each of us can grow more knowledgeable and compassionate regarding how we deal with unhoused people in our city. Questions that guided me in my preparation were, how do we sort out the complex personal reactions from compassion and concern to fear and frustration? How do we humanize this issue? And I'm not an expert. I'm just a citizen with an interest in civil conversations and concerned about the people in Philadelphia who are unhoused. So just so you know, I'm going to be throwing out a lot of names of organizations. You can get comments that I'm sharing today. I'll finalize them tomorrow and send them out to anybody who emails me. I'll put my email in the chat, and Travis and I will be putting together something to send to everybody who is here today to give them the names of all the organizations that I'm mentioning today. So I'm asking, as we have done in the past, that we agree to some guidelines for our discussion. So I'm going to ask you to agree to these. So please listen by signaling. There are 7 of them. 1, the goals of this discussion is to increase our understanding and to help us create a more ethical society, not to win an argument or challenge others. In other words, to engage in self-reflection more than having an action plan or an agenda you're pushing. 2, respect confidentiality. What we discuss here and in small groups is confidential to that group. Listen respectfully. Speak from your experience. Use I statements. Don't dominate. Make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. Strive to be non-judgmental of others and of yourself, and be patient. Can you signal your agreement to those guidelines by giving a thumbs up or wiggling your fingers? I like to just get some visual sense that people are okay with that. Right? I see some hands clapping, and okay. Hopefully we can all do that. So please consider using similar agreements in other forums you organize, because we need more civil discussion about ethical issues in our society. I want to thank Barbara and Maggie, Bonnie, Travis, and others in CCRA for contributing information and ideas that I'm presenting today. I'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll go to small group discussions, and then we'll return to the whole group for more discussions. So can I just ask, if you're live, how many of you watched the Netflix Hour documentary, Lead Me Home? I'm just curious as to how many people watched that. Not too many. Okay, I urge you to do that. It's just an hour long, Lead Me Home on Netflix. And it's very well produced, and it's not about information, it's really about creating greater compassion. Yeah. So the film ends with this one line on screen: on any given night in America, over 500,000 people experience homelessness. And I think films can bring you inside the lives of unhoused people and allow you to hear their stories. It's going to be interesting to see an upcoming film which actor Nick Nolte was playing an unhoused person. The film's title is Rittenhouse. Did anybody see the film crew back in October when they were on Rittenhouse Square? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. I see the production crew was camped out in the Ethical Society, so we certainly knew about that. And a number of you don't need films because you've been involved in the world of unhoused people, some through CCRA's relationship with Project Home. My sister Mary Skillian. I love mantra. None of us are home, and all of us are home. And some on this call may have themselves experienced being unhoused. So I think it's always important to be careful about generalizing about who's on the call. I've been guilty of using we to talk about one group or another when really we need to be open to the fact that we've all had different life experiences. But I want to start by touching on some of the labels and assumptions about unhoused people that are in the air. I know there are times in my life that I've fallen prey to stereotypes. Sometimes we assume that unhoused people are fragile or particularly weak, but like the film Lead Me Home illustrates, and if you've had experiences, many of these people are amazingly resilient given what they've had to go through. In addition, I think some don't appreciate even being described as homeless, a term occasionally I still use because the identity of a person is reduced to their state if you call them the homeless. So that's something to, I think, to try to avoid. But even homeless people can be inaccurate because many have a home, but for a period they can't live there for various reasons, often abuse at home. And others call the street or their little corner of a local park their home. So many people suggest that we switch to a more accurate term of unhoused people. So I'm going to try to do that today. Eve Garrow of the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California explains that the word homeless has become inseparable from a, quote, toxic narrative that blames or demonizes people who are unhoused. For some people, the term homeless implies someone who's dangerous or devious, like the way we used to throw around terms like bum or panhandler in our society. And of course, it's important not to conflate panhandlers and unhoused people. There can be an overlap, but lots of homeless people don't panhandle, and lots of panhandlers are not unhoused. Other stereotypes or images are attached to seeing people carrying around lots of bags full of personal possessions or pushing an overflowing shopping cart. And we often assume that this may be a sign of mental illness, but it's important to remember that while hoarding can be an indicator of mental illness, it can simply be a way to provide some familiarity and stability, because the tragedy of unhoused people is that they often lose everything. So they may naturally hold on to what little they do have. Fortunately, the city's emergency housing program does provide some storage for people's belongings. Let me touch a bit on the rights of unhoused people. Remember, even though some may treat unhoused people as less than citizens, they are fully protected by the laws and by our Constitution. Besides, if you want to just talk about the bottom line, arresting unhoused people is both inhumane and raises the cost for the public sector. And it also increases the chance that when released from custody, people will return to the streets. Arrests do not help people figure out a way out of homelessness. And here's what is not illegal. It is not a crime to be homeless. It's not a crime to sit, occupy, or sleep in public spaces. It's not a crime to beg or to panhandle. It's not a crime to have a mental illness. In some extreme cases, people can call in a 302, which is an involuntary psychiatric hospitalization for people who are clearly in great distress and perhaps a danger to themselves or the public, but that's pretty rare. Now, this is what is illegal. People are not allowed to block entrances to buildings or ATMs, impede passage on the sidewalk, sleep in private alcoves or alleyways, urinate or defecate in public, camp in tents. Tents can be removed after an individual has been notified. And it's not legal to get involved in aggressive panhandling. Obviously, it's a judgment call as to what's aggressive, right? That can be part of our discussion. And the city website offers this advice. If somebody's blocking your entryway, or if you feel unsafe, move away and call 911. Police can be dispatched and they can require a person to move from the property. They cannot arrest them for simply being there, but they can ask that they move away. If no arrest is made, the officer is then required to call homeless outreach service of the city to follow up. Homeless outreach services can offer shelter or transportation or medical care for unhoused people, but they cannot force them to take advantage of these offers. Let me share few statistics and information. I mean, obviously this is an international problem and it's worse around the world. The United States, given our general wealth level, has less of a problem than elsewhere around the world. Focusing on our city, the Understanding the Problem section of a city's Office of Homeless Services is a useful website that'll be sent out to everybody. And there are some of the statistics I found interesting. I'll ask this question to you all. Where do you think on this call, don't shout it out, but just think about this. Where do you think Philadelphia sits regarding the number of unhoused people per capita compared to other major cities in the United States? Are we in the top 25% of number of unhoused people for major cities, the second quarter, the third quarter, or the bottom 25%? So I'd be curious if you're on screen, just raise your hand. Do you think we're in the top 25%? How many people think that? Wiggle your fingers. Second quarter, okay, about 4 or 5 people. Third quarter, 2 or 3. Bottom 25%, at least the lowest quarter. Interesting. Okay, pretty well spread out. Philadelphia has, according to what the city website says, the lowest number of street homeless per capita of any large city, of the largest cities in the United States. About 5,700 people are considered to be unhoused in this city, which includes 950 that are unsheltered, have no access, but who don't even access homeless services. The top city, New York, has 78,000 according to HUD, Housing and Urban Development. LA has the second most, 56,000. And then there's a huge drop. Seattle, Tacoma, San Jose, Santa Clara, San Diego, San Francisco, Oakland, Santa Ana and Anaheim, Phoenix, Washington, D.C. all have between 11,000 and 6,000. Again, Philadelphia has 5,700. It's a little surprising, and some people say it is because homelessness in Philadelphia has become more visible recently due to the boom in construction that's taking up a lot of lot areas and sheltered areas. Fewer public spaces for people to live unnoticed in our city. Regarding city facilities for unhoused people, the city and its nonprofit partners provide a total of 11,500 emergency, temporary, and permanent beds. The private-public partnership has helped about 970 families and individuals moved from a homeless situation to housed. According to municipal authorities, the city's permanent housing programs have an average of a 90% success rate at preventing a return to an unhoused state. That seems particularly high, especially since I've seen studies that claim that the supply of affordable housing doesn't keep pace with the demand. So I'm actually a little skeptical of that claim, but maybe that's the case. So who are the unhoused? 2 studies that one I'll cite says that they indicate 4 types of unhoused people: episodic, people who go in and out of housing due to finances or addiction or other reasons; transitional situations, that people go unhoused between jobs, for example; and then chronically unhoused people; and hidden unhoused people, some people that don't even make it onto statistics or studies. Another study divided people into these categories: addicts, people who are addicted greatly due to the opioid epidemic; mentally challenged people. Veterans used to be a relatively large segment of homeless populations, but recently I think that's changed a bit. Their numbers are decreasing slightly. There are unhoused people who are simply travelers passing through the city. Some unhoused people are ones that claim that they've chosen the freedom of being outside of an institution rather than joining a housing program. But most are temporarily homeless due to a loss of jobs or evictions, and they have no support network, family and otherwise. They're vulnerable because rents are rising swiftly, increasing 40% in some cities. According to Redfin, overall rents in the US jumped 14% in December of last year alone. That's the largest rise in more than 2 years. Most affected cities are Austin, Texas, 40% rise, and New York City had a 35% increase. Philadelphia has had an increase last year of 13% rent increases. And many of you have heard stories which are true that a lot of times investors buy up homes in poorer neighborhoods or neighborhoods with a higher percentage of renters of people of color. And these properties are usually undervalued, and they making them targets for investors who raise the rents or cut services and force renters out of their homes. That's happening quite a bit. But for the last part of my talk, I'm going to go from statistics into how we personally interact with unhoused people. It's so easy to treat unhoused people as others, but some of us on this Zoom, as I said, may have been unhoused at some point in our lives, and I think some of us may be one paycheck away from becoming homeless, so I think it's important to always remember that. Taking into that into account, I do want to offer some do's and don'ts that I've picked up from websites to consider for your discussion. First, do take your safety seriously. Trust your intuition. The city website recommends that you listen to your personal instincts. So consider the situation you are at, your personal strengths and limitations, and take precautions. Are there other people around? Are you a smaller person or a woman compared to the other person? Are you perhaps in danger? If you can give money, maybe don't take out your wallet, which can make you more vulnerable. Carry some bills in a particular pocket that allows you to reach in relatively swiftly and give it to somebody who asks. You could carry cash cards from Wawa's or other food establishments. We had a member of the Ethical Society who was doing that on a regular basis. The city website says that you should feel free to talk with people who are experiencing homelessness. They can appreciate being treated humanely. You could be aware of the services in your area or your community and direct people to them. There are some guides like Project Homes. I don't know if Bethesda does as well, but I like the Project Home booklet, where to turn to during COVID-19. It has resources for people experiencing homelessness in Philly. Travis will send that out to everybody on this Zoom, as well as other resources. It can be challenging to interact with people you think are unhoused. At least it is for me. I'm embarrassed about admitting the little dialogue that goes in my head when I'm approaching someone camped out on the street. Sometimes when I'm in a hurry or distracted by other thoughts, or times that I just feel my empathy tank is empty, I'll either purposely look away, or maybe I'll angle a little bit away from where they are on the sidewalk. I'm not proud of that, but I think it all happens at times. When I do catch the eye of somebody, either on purpose or by accident, suddenly the stakes are ratcheted up for me in my conscience. Do I engage with them? Do I find out what they need? I feel bad if I don't pay attention to unhoused people I pass, because one writer on the subject, the Dr. Rohit Varma, said that ignoring homeless people reinforces social isolation, which can prove psychologically damaging. So by not doing anything, I'm actually contributing to a harm. He says that some people may offer money but avoid eye contact or any conversation, which doesn't always address that sense of social exclusion. Conversations can be simple, from, how are you today, or where are you from, or they don't have to be long conversations. Even a few seconds can brighten somebody's mood and make them feel less invisible. Dr. Varma continues, he says, if you engage, ask them to share a part of their lives with you. During breaks in the story, listeners, you can nod and repeat back what the person said to show that you're listening, just to offer a sense of understanding. And when individuals start telling stories, it's important to not ask too many personal questions. Privacy is something precious to many of the unhoused people, because being out in public, they often have very little privacy as it is. And if you engage in conversations, respect the individual by asking permission. You ask permission to share items or advice. Don't just hand them something. Say, may I offer you a sandwich? And only hand it if they say yes. Because choice is something that's often not something they have a lot of in their lives. Avoid offering unsolicited.
Hugh, you're muted.
Yep, thanks. Here's a final sort of list of some things you can do in the area of immediate help. Some of these will repeat. Respect the homeless as individuals, respond with kindness, whether they reach out to you first or should you reach out to them, smile at them, ask how they're doing. And should they begin to share with you, you can stop for a second and listen, respecting their space and privacy as much as you can. Don't assume you know who they are or their life journey. You could carry a list of shelters like that little Project Home, because many can't get access to the internet. So some of these booklets that we'll share in an email going out. You can offer food or other items. You can bring an extra sandwich with you if you go to work, or if it's hot, bottled water can be important. And when you pass something out, when you pass out stuff, they may ask you for change as well. And so you have to consider how to react to that. Some people like to say, can I get you something at a restaurant, which you can do. If you go out for food, take your leftovers. But that can be difficult because offering leftovers, some people feel insulted by that. You know, I don't want your leftovers. And I think it's important to not overreact if some people act picky towards you. I know I sometimes have felt put off by that, but again, unhoused folks are just like you and me. It's just their pickiness is on public display because of not having their own space. You can offer clothing in colder climates and in winter, used coats, fresh socks, disposable hand warmers. And you can obviously donate clothing to many of the organizations that I'll mention later and are on the list. But again, it's important to ask people if they want these items. Money always makes a huge difference. You can donate to nonprofit organizations that serve unhoused people. But advocates can also say that you can also give cash to individuals. You can do both. I'm always caught when somebody says, I prefer to give to an organization, but I know I can do both. It's often the most direct way to help immediately to give cash. And I know people hesitate because they worry the money will go towards drugs or alcohol or other bad habits. That might be true, but also individuals also ask for cash for a variety of reasons. Hunger, to build up enough for a hotel room and a shower, for basic necessities like soap or deodorant or razor blades. You can bring food to local shelters, call your local soup kitchens and find out what they need in terms of donations, or volunteer at a shelter. These places can't exist without volunteers, and it gives you an opportunity to connect and support people individually, or volunteer at a soup kitchen, and advocate. Help agencies with policy and initiatives support the goal of ending homelessness. It is by far one of the most achievable social goals to end homelessness for anybody who doesn't want to be unhoused. So a couple of the great websites that are available that we'll send out in the email tomorrow, I'm putting in the chat, the Philadelphia City's Office of Homeless Services, and they have a nice little information sheet. The city's Homeless outreach engages people on the street on a daily basis, and they try to develop trusting relationships, get to know the people. They try never to give up on any individual, continue to engage them until they're ready to get help and services. Sometimes it takes a long-term relationship to ease people to services that can help them. Some of you know about CBHRS, CEABHRS. It's the Coordinated Entry and Assessment-Based Housing Referral System. They coordinate various efforts to try to offer people services, and they also stress the importance of not assuming everybody wants it. It's not about we will give this person homelessness, unhoused people, these opportunities. It's what housing or service assistance can we offer to people that will quickly and permanently end their housing crisis. Households are matched with the most appropriate housing and service assistance to end their housing crisis permanently. Philadelphia's homeless management system is a database that is useful that manages CBRE's efforts. Two of the projects, or some of the projects that I know of that I'll share in that email tomorrow, Project Home I've mentioned before, founded by one of the coolest Catholic nuns I've ever known, Sister Mary Scullion, does insist that candidates for their program commit to this program. So go to Project Home. Broad Street Ministry offers meals, showers, clothing, mail drops. Very important. Many people who are unhoused don't have a way to get mail. So they give an address that unhoused people can use with no obligation. They talk about radical hospitality. Jeffrey Isaacson from Bethesda Project offers many services that I hope we'll talk more about closer to 1 o'clock. The People's Emergency Center provides emergency shelter for women and children. I'll throw the Bethesda Project organization into the chat, the website. You can look at that before 1 o'clock, and maybe you'll have questions for Jeffrey. Arch Street Methodist Church at Broad and Arch has the Grace Cafe and community outreach programs. And I think it's important to prevent evictions, especially now during COVID. So Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network provides emergency shelter and eviction prevention services, as well as the community legal services. Very important, because so many unhoused people have no idea where to go for legal help, which sends them on their way out of whatever housing they are involved in. So I put those eviction services in the chat. So thank you for listening. Let's move on to small group conversations now that we'll break off into. Touch on any question that you would like. I'm going to offer a couple of general questions to consider. What did you learn? What questions remain in your head? And what might you do differently from what you heard today so far? You can get into those questions or get into more specific questions. Like the two I'll offer is, should you give money to unhoused people? And if so, how much, under what circumstances? If not, why not? And if you think giving to groups helping unhoused people, could you do both? Give both to the person and to the organization? So that question is a live one every day. Knowing today's event was coming up, I purposely went and gave money to homeless people because often I don't, and I wanted to think about it more deeply. A second question you could ask is, what roadblocks keep you personally from making personal connections to people living on the streets? And how might you overcome those roadblocks? There are real good reasons not to do it for each individual person, I get that. But how could you lean against your tendency not to get involved? So I'll leave it at that. We'll go to small groups. We'll come back for a more general discussion, and I'll ask each small group to just share a very brief one nugget or two nuggets from your conversation that either shows areas of agreement or real questions that you have. Thanks. Travis, if you'd facilitate the small group breakout rooms, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. And before we go to your breakout rooms, just letting you know that the breakout rooms will not be recorded, so you can talk freely. All right, see you in 20 minutes.